Me.
All right, there we go. We are ready to go. Thanks everyone for coming and joining. We've got several subjects to cover today, and a couple of them. Let's see where to start. I think first off, I want to talk a little bit about marketing, and I think I know that this is coming from a lot of demos of Remy. And in case you haven't noticed, we do have a new product called Remy. And I expect everybody was like, oh, yeah, of course we know that. But, a lot of people don't go to every single meeting. So if you don't know, Remy is an amazing new tool available now, and it is live on the back end, so you can go log in and create an account. But after several of these demos, it's becoming very clear to me that there's some really easy things I think we can start doing as listing agents to amplify the visibility of our listings and make them more searchable. And a couple of them are really easy, and I wanted to talk about them. And the first one is floor plans. And Kevlar, maybe you can give me some perspective. I don't know what it looks like up in Park City, the Wasatch back for floor plans, but I know on the front and in those other markets, floor plans are not actually very common to see on listings. And I think our Utah real estate culture is the exception nationwide. I think it's pretty commonplace to have floor plans included. And I'm on a personal mission to include them because for one reason, because UtahRealEstate.com happens to have a service called Cubicasa, which gives you a free floor plan for every listing. How many people have used this service or are in the habit of including floor plans on their listings? Just throw it in the chat, unmute yourself. Felicia says yes. And also, I've used it 3 times now in different scenarios. And so what they're doing, their partnership with Cubicasa is offering that free floor plan for your listing. And Cubicasa has other services that go along with that, where you might pay for an upgrade and get something out of it. But it's very apparent. It's very apparent to me that this is something that I think if you're including on your listings, I think your visibility is going to increase. And I think that because it's closely related to the Matterport issue, which Remy is sort of bringing up as well. Marilee says, yes, if it is free under 5,000 square feet, that makes sense. For the uninitiated, Cubicasa is stupidly simple. It couldn't be any easier to use and figure out. You do have to connect, you log into Utah Real Estate and, you need to connect via that portal. But once you have the app and it's downloaded and you're connected that way, all you're doing is taking a walkthrough video of the space. And you don't even need to be good at it. You really don't even need to think through it. And it'll create a layout that is pretty dang accurate, surprisingly accurate. Now, it does have services on there that has square footages and dimensions. I think you probably shouldn't do that. I think just a simple floor plan to give so people can see where things are is probably what you should do, because I think those dimensions may not be the most accurate thing in the world, and we want to avoid being the source of dimensions and square footages, obviously. But for listing visibility and marketing purposes, that's well worth your time to figure out and execute. And even if your home is bigger than 5,000 feet, I don't know, Marilee, maybe you have some experience here, but I can't imagine it's more than $15 or something to get that, to upgrade whatever you're getting there. But I would encourage everybody to start doing that for listing visibility. Natalie says, we got conflicting answers from Natalie and Marilee. $15 for over 5,000 and a $30 amount for over 5,000. Yeah, there's several options there that you could select and get different packages. But the bottom line is that's a small amount of money to increase your listings visibility, and really, and in my opinion, we're providing kind of a next level service for our clients there with that floor plan. So I highly encourage everybody to do that. Scott says, I had Promdiaco do it. I don't want to touch that because I want the measurements. I don't know. Is that a service that you're talking about? Here's okay. So I would imagine there's plenty of services there. And the reason I'm plugging Cubicasa is because they're one of the providers that are, we have partnership with here on the UtahRealEstate.com MLS. And so, we're getting, a basic floor plan for free. They do provide the dimensions, and you can select, a drawing with the dimensions and without the dimensions. And I think there's some legal, you're kind of making the brokers nervous when you create something with dimensions on a property. We can probably explain it away with, get your own measurements and stuff. Still makes me a little bit nervous. I will say though, for the purposes that I used it, the dimensions were good enough. They weren't like 4 feet off or anything like that. They were definitely good enough to give you a really good perspective on what's there. I'm surprised I haven't been plugging this longer because it's been around for a minute. And I think there's plenty of people using it, but I would encourage everybody to step up and start using that. So,
Mike, I think the best practice is to use what's on the builder's card from the tax information for square footage, because that's what it was, it was supposed to be that many square foot when it was built, unless the builder changed a few items on the floor plan during construction. Unless we have a current appraisal that states otherwise, and we state that as the source of the square footage. But the problem with these things is we're not sure how accurate those measurements are, and I think you could get into trouble using that and citing that as a source for the seller's disclosures. I think it's safer to stick, and I think our E&O would agree too, to stick with what's on the builder's card or a recent appraisal.
Yeah, and that's sort of why I'm hesitant to include. I think for for non-advertising purposes, maybe our own purposes or what have you, it's okay to maybe share something. But if you do share one of these drawings with dimensions, you need to take a lot of time to explain that this is an app's representation of the square footage. It's not mine. We don't know. Make sure you explain that away.
Buyer to verify all information.
Yep. Buyer to verify all information. Thank you. I think that's one thing that we should start doing. The other thing that I'm discovering too, as we start using Remy more, is that some things have been very apparent, and that the visibility of our listings varies dramatically in two categories: if you have a Matterport and if you don't have a Matterport. If you have a Matterport, your listing visibility is 2, 3, 4, sometimes 5 times what it is without it. So, and I know that, kind of the problem here is the Matterports aren't cheap, and some listings just, we're not going to spend that kind of money on some of these listings, and some of them, it doesn't make sense anyway. I think the workaround, though, is, this is my initial advice on this one. People still want the perspective on the layout of the home. They still want perspective on how the home flows and, even what the finishes look like other than the photos. So my recommendation is you do a simple walkthrough video, and, maybe if you want to explain it, you can. You can add some cheesy background music. That's fine too. But, you could do a simple 2-minute walkthrough video of the home, post it to your own personal YouTube channel, and put it as a link in the tour on the MLS. And I don't know how PC MLS is handling that portion of it, or if they'll take YouTube videos, but UtahRealEstate.com.
Jill's able to unmute and tell us.
Please, Jill.
Rick actually present on the Zillow Showcase in her latest, Mastering the Tools or Mastering the Platforms class. And it seems to me that Zillow is requiring a certain format, or they will not include. They won't include the property in the showcase unless that walkthrough is done in a certain format. ProMedia actually shoots it in that correct format, so that you can include a walkthrough. They won't accept a cell phone version, YouTube version of it.
Oh, that's
I think
interesting.
that's what they were teaching in that class. Jill, is that correct?
Yeah, so they want their photographers to be taking the photos on your Zillow showcase. The thing that I've found is that if you know you're going to do the Zillow showcase right out of the gate, then you have Pro Media take the required photos and video tours and all that they link up for you, so that you don't have to do it. But if you already have a listing that you want to now, that's already active, that you now want to go into Zillow, there's all this back office rigmarole you have to do to get your photos on there. So my opinion is, if you're going to do showcase, do it right at the beginning when you're ordering your photography. Otherwise, it's going to be a headache to get your stuff uploaded the right way after the fact.
Yeah. I can't remember what the name of the format is, but Pro Media already did it, and it was already compliant with Zillow Showcase. So I don't know whether who was Spotlight was able to actually change over the way they were shooting those walkthroughs either. So
Yeah,
just make sure if that's your plan.
Yeah, I'm not sure.
Yeah, that's a really good point. I think some of the listings that our instincts are already to order these walkthroughs and whatnot, and maybe we're more prepared for them. But I think every single listing, it's worth our time to do at least some basic walkthrough of these properties to give you some perspective on it. And I don't want to, there's plenty of REMI trainings coming up. And I think we're going to be pushing this heavily over the next few months. And I don't want to necessarily do that here, but I did want to talk about it for a bit and just say that, these are easy things that you could do to make sure your listing is getting more visible. By the way, just on this chat, just out of curiosity, how many people on this chat have logged into REMI and used it a couple times? I got a couple hand waves. Scott with the yes. All right, good to hear. And by the way, on a lot of, please remember that this is our initial launch of this product, and so even from our first launch where we did that special meeting and Joe demoed it, we've already added updates that agent have requested. Specifically, enter an unlisted property so you could create the report. And that was so fast, I wasn't even aware of it, and I'm sort of paying attention to this process. So you can already add an unlisted property to REMI and produce the same information as you can with a listed property. So don't hesitate to email and talk to your brokers about the changes and stuff you want to see, because we want to make this amazing. And we can't really do that without a whole bunch of people telling us the stuff to fix. So anyway, if you haven't logged on, it's in the back end. We got a big old tile there you can click on and just simply log in. It's definitely worth your time. And I'm not embarrassed at all to say that this is, it might be the best single real estate tool I've ever seen. Just with the amount of information it gives you, the presentation, the angle it gives you. And I say this all the time. I think that given enough time, all the real estate professionals could probably come to similar conclusions, but it would take a lot of time for you to come to those conclusions that this produces. Yeah.
So Mike, just for those that are new to our company that I see on here, it's found on the BHHS intranet, Utah Properties intranet. So it's not on Market Resource. So when Dallas sets you up, you should have bookmarked that up in your address bar there, so you just click directly on the BHHS intranet. That's where you see that link.
And while we're here, because I already have it in my chat, there's the link. You don't even have to go there. You can click on it right now and save it. And you can log in. And by the way, go in. Make sure when you do this before you're sharing it with your clients, go in there and add your profile pic and update your contact info. Because I was playing around with it yesterday, and those things weren't necessarily updated. So, before you share it with your clients, make sure you do that. Okay, let's see what else we got today. Moving on. Hey, I wanted to talk about. I had a conversation today that I thought was really interesting, and I think it's worth 10 minutes on Huddle, and it really boiled down to, and in fact, I won't name names because some people don't like me naming names, but I got an email explaining a situation on new construction. And the agent's question was a really good question in that the communication from the agent was poor, the listing agent of new construction. The response from the builder's agent was also poor and delayed, and created a situation where they had the ability to close. It's the house they want, but because there's punch list items, because there's remaining things that need to be done, they didn't have the confidence that those things would actually be done after closing. And the question remains, well, do we accept the problems? Do we try to address them? Or do we, is our gut feeling about this, poison the well? And I think that, even though this is a slightly more unique situation, then new construction would be a slightly more unique situation with punch list items and things that might be corrected after closing and whatnot. I think the sentiment is similar in that it's a good reminder that an agent's poor communication can poison the well of an otherwise really great transaction. So I want to encourage everybody that if this is happening to you and you're in a transaction or attempting to be in a transaction where the other agent's non-response or poor response or lack of professionalism is causing a problem, because listen, it makes sense because their non-response transfers to your buyer, right? That communication and that sentiment of what's going on transfers to your client, whether you want it to or not. I would encourage everybody that if it reaches a certain level, you might want to have a serious talk. Like, hey, we need to talk for a second. Give me a call. And before you address any other problems, say, hey, listen, you should understand that my buyer is already nervous about buying this property, and not because of the inspection and not because of their financing, because they're nervous about the communication and lack of trust that's occurring at this exact moment. This is like have that conversation. And, these issues are pervasive in our business. These communication issues are pervasive in our business. And I feel like they are hard to overcome. And you can kind of see this is related to one of our agents. She's putting in the chat. So this is Felicia and Lisa Thompson's deal. So I'll say their names now. But I know all of you have experienced this, and I feel like you get into a spot, especially in this situation where the listing agent is the broker. What are you going to do? But remember, we all put up with some level of unprofessionalism, because are we really going to start a petty fight over you didn't call me for 2 days, sometimes? No, we don't want to do that. We don't want to escalate the situation, because then that could be a problem in and of itself. But when you do experience, if your buyers are making comments about the other agent's professionalism, that might be a time that you pause and wonder, is this a time to have a come to Jesus meeting with the agent on the other side? Because maybe they do change their behavior. Maybe they don't, but the bottom line is you as their representative have made really good attempts to rectify the situation. And obviously we need to be professionals here, and we need to say, hey, listen, I don't want to have a debate about this, but I want you to know that my client now perceives you as an obstacle to a successful transaction, because these things are very real and they happen all the time, and it's up to us to overcome those problems, quite frankly. And so, it's just, in my opinion, that's one way to do that. Anybody have
Mike,
any comment?
I think one thing that we should be doing as agents is remembering that we're supposed to kind of take the emotion out of the response from the other side so that it doesn't poison the well, as you've said. I think, yeah, just a prime example is, hey, you know, your seller says to you, how dare that buyer make an offer like this? That's the worst offer I've ever seen. Tell them to go stuff their head where the sun don't shine. That's not exactly what you say back to the other agent. You say, hey, my client is appreciative of your offer. There's a few things that weren't quite up to where they hoped to achieve. And we're going to present a counter and not transfer all that emotion back and forth in the transaction. We just need to kind of tone it down, kind of strip out all the emotion and stick to the facts. And I think we'll have a lot more success in transactions. And just kind of refer to the code of ethics. You know, we don't want to actually be passing along negative information about other agents and their business practices. And it goes a long ways towards having a good closing. And you can tell them how the how the sausage was made after the transaction closes. I just gotta let you know, this is a tough transaction. We had a lot of difficult conversations with the other side, but I'm glad we got it closed, and you can tell them about the hard parts after. But during the battle, right in the middle of going back and forth, it can really just derail everything. Yeah. Lisa, you were going to say something.
I came in at halftime.
Oh.
I just got home and Felicia texted me. I just want to say, number one, we never said anything about the other agent, but actions speak louder than words is all I can say about that. Because we're talking no response for days, but that's all I wanted to add.
Yeah, and you know, I do love Kevin's comment, because that's totally true. I think, and I have seen time where we attach ourselves. We're so emotionally invested with our clients, and we're like, how dare they do this to these people who I really respect and love right now? So I've seen that happen, and it can happen. But there are, like, I think if you, one of the good examples is if you go to that Utah real estate agent Facebook page, you know, or the biggest one, it seems like a lot of people are on there. I mean, I don't know how many times a week someone posts a complaint about agent communication, but it's got to be a few times a week. And the comments are they just fill up with the complaints. And so, you know,
I try to stay away from those sites because
man, it angers me too. It angers me too. And about once a year, about 5 times a year, I type out a response, and 4 of those times I delete it without posting it. But one sneaks through. One always sneaks through. And you know what? It's never an uplifting comment I'm making, ever. Yeah. It's never an uplifting comment. So
more flies with time.
That's right. That's totally true. So, and I'm not like mean or anything, but I'm just like, you know, I type it out. Maybe you get out of your system and you delete it. But I shouldn't even be typing out. I just need to stop going there and looking at that. But anyway.
Big stupid is the other thing.
No, so. Not on Facebook anyway. If you could fix it, you're not fixing it on Facebook. But anyway, I do think, and in this case, what I really love that Lisa and Felicia did here was they were like, listen, we want somebody who's not involved to give us an opinion, because we've been dealing with this for a while. We're already emotionally invested. You know, we've invested a ton of time here. This is what we think. Are we being unreasonable? That's a really good practice. Because, listen, as a broker, here's what I'll tell you. As a broker who does 1 or 2 transactions a year, every single time I catch myself about to say and do things that I would never recommend an agent doing, and so far, maybe once or twice, but so far I've stopped myself and go, would I give myself this advice? No, I wouldn't give myself this advice. Like, this is dumb. And I'm making these decisions because I'm involved, I'm close, I'm connected. And when you talk to other people who are outside of this transaction who don't have the connection and all the emotional baggage that goes along with the transaction, they might have a different perspective. And so it's a really good practice to reach out to other people and get their perspective, especially in our business, because things can get wishy-washy, in the weeds, complicated, and it's up to us to give clear, cohesive responses. So, the last part of that is, the second part of this is that my advice here, and I don't know if it was great advice, and I'd love to hear Kevin's response because, well, let's just face it, Kevin's smarter than me.
You're right.
Was that, the client in this instance, because of we'll call it incompetence on the other side, and they're just non-responsiveness, they're like, I don't trust them. So trust is a big issue here. But I think in order to show our clients that we're going above and beyond, let's make one more attempt. Let's lay out every issue we have that needs to be addressed and the time at which it needs to be addressed, and then let them know explicitly if these things aren't dealt with and a response is done immediately, we got to walk. We can't continue with this transaction. And I wouldn't recommend that strategy all the time, but in certain circumstances, remember, like, especially in this one where we have time to make this response and, it's not like the deadline isn't in 10 minutes. But, every now and again, you need to play a little hardball and you need to put in writing exactly what's going on, when you need a response by.
That only works if your client gives you permission to pursue that and they're willing to walk.
That's right.
You
And
can't
she
make
actually-
that threat and
they
then
actually-
have the thing blow up and then they'll blame you. So
Yeah.
That's right.
They actually wanted us to say that. I'm going to add that
Yeah.
since we've had this conversation, we just got the appraisal back $35,000 low. Okay, I'm gonna unmute or remute.
Well, I mean, things have a way of resolving themselves sometimes. So, this job can be so irritating sometimes. There's joy, though.
Steve Roney always says, hey, the real estate's a really good business if there just weren't people involved.
I know. All these people and their opinions. Like, life would be so much easier if I could just dictate how everybody behaved around me. Like, how is this so hard to understand? All right, let's talk about... I do not believe... Last time we were going to talk about the short-term rental agreement addendum. I don't believe we got to that last time, so I'm going to go ahead, share my screen, and we're going to talk about it. This one sort of always is coming across our desk frequently, I would say. So to begin with, I think it's important to remember, let's start with, when should we use this, and when should we just put in, when someone takes possession? It's kind of, I don't think there's any rules here. You can take, because I think we're frequently and very comfortably putting in 48 hours after recording, we take possession. I don't think anybody blinks at that. 72 hours, no problems there. I think once we sort of hit the 4-day mark, people should definitely start asking the questions about this addendum and whether or not we should be using it. And while there's no rule, it does feel to me, and you can have whatever feeling you want on this, I think would be okay. It does feel to me at the 7-day mark, it just needs to be there. And 7 days doesn't sound like a long period of time. But at the same time, it's a long period of time for insurance companies, for lenders, and it should be a long period of time for your buyer who has to be a landlord for that period of time. Because remember, that's really what we're talking about, is how to convert your buyer and how to handle them being a buyer and being a landlord for a short period of time, because that's really what we're talking about. And so this addendum addresses a lot of important problems, and if you fail to do this in certain circumstances, it can really make you look bad and really ruin relationships. So anyway, here we go. Short-term leaseback addendum. We're just going to jump strictly to instructions to buyer and seller. This is a legally binding an addendum to the Rep C for seller's rental of the property after closing. If buyer is financing the purchase of this property, either as a primary residence or a second home, then buyer may be obligated to take occupancy of the property within a set period of time specified by buyer's lender after closing. Buyer is strongly advised, that's all caps underlined, to consult the buyer's lender regarding the potential impact of this addendum, especially if the rental period, defined in Section 2A, is a 60 days or longer. Yeah, that's a big one. I don't think you're going to get around that. I don't think you want to get around that piece of the puzzle. But 60 days seems to be the only period of time that I've heard that a lender will allow someone to rent a property before they occupy it. Has anybody heard of a shorter period of time? It seems like that's pretty... I've never heard of any other period of time where a lender will say, yeah, it's 30 days or 2 weeks or 90 days. I've never heard any other number other than 60, so it must be the one that the lender cares about.
It's just that it's under with underwriting guidelines. If it goes over 60, they now have to treat it as an investment property, and the buyer's required to put a lot more money down. So that's the underwriting guideline is 60 days.
Yeah. All right, paragraph 1, lease back. Seller desires to remain in the property on a short-term basis after closing. Buyer agrees to lease the property to seller, and seller agrees to lease the property to buyer. Buyer and seller agree that Section 3.3 of the REPC is modified so that the lease of the property is not by separate written agreement, and that the seller shall deliver physical possession of the property according to the terms and conditions set below. This addendum shall survive closing. I hope so. Terminal lease and payment of rent. The lease back of the property shall start on the date of closing and shall continue until this date. Obviously, I think here we shouldn't just do a default 60 days. That's would be bad. I don't know why anybody would do that anyway. But make sure we're very specific on that. Rent shall be for the entire rental period. I know that people have a habit of, during negotiations, we're, being cordial with each other and we want things to be successful. And very often people are putting $0 in there. And I think overall that's sort of okay. But for your client's sake, I don't think we should default to, if we represent a buyer here, I don't think our default answer should be, oh yeah, we'll just give you that. Of course, market conditions would dictate how you would respond here. But maybe as a default, we should float something here. Payment of rent shall be delivered by seller to buyer no later than the closing in the form of, and then put an amount there. So essentially, you're saying in this spot, we're saying that if we are actually agreeing to money here, that it's delivered, seller actually has to deliver that at closing to your client, which I like that. Buyer and seller agree that seller may shorten the rental period, providing buyer with written notice 4 days prior to delivering possession of the property to the buyer. Proration of rents, how do we handle it? It either will or will not. Really, to me, the two most important things in this, the three most important are obviously the term of the lease, how long it's going to last, who handles the utilities, and the security deposit. So paragraph 3 here, we're going to check who handles all those. I highly recommend, I don't know what I recommend. My instincts tell me that we shouldn't be transferring any of these services into the buyer's name until they take possession. I don't see why you would do that. It kind of creates another problem. Seems more seamless if we transfer those when it takes possession. If anybody has any other perspective, please share that. The biggest one for me, though, would be the security deposit. Hold on one sec. Reading comments. Scott says, I think the most important issue is the cost of overstaying the term. It must hurt. I agree with Scott there. Linda says, I was taught that you shouldn't make it too comfortable for them to extend their stay, so charge them. I couldn't agree more. They're a daily amount. Yeah, I do. I too like the daily amount. Thanks for reminding me. I probably wouldn't have said that if you hadn't reminded me. I love the daily amount, actually, instead of like prorated amounts. Even though the math is the same, to explicitly state here that we are charging you X number of dollars per day, I think is the motivating factor. More motivating than saying the same amount in terms of a monthly amount prorated. I think it's a little more biting there. In the event, so here we go on. In the event the seller is responsible for a utility charge that a utility provider is required to be in buyer's name, seller shall pay for the utility charge within 7 days of buyer providing seller an invoice of the utility charge. Notwithstanding the utilities above, buyer and seller agree that during the rental period, seller shall be responsible for payment of all cable, satellite TV, and internet landscape maintenance, snow removal, unless such services are provided by a homeowners association. Yeah, I don't like that. But it does say that. Security deposit. I think this is, I have seen in certain markets where, market conditions where our buyers are just willing to do whatever and we don't have security deposits. I think this is a huge problem. Always, always, always recommend that your clients push for security deposits. I mean, they're a landlord. Landlords without security deposits have no leverage. And it can get really, really ugly. And for those of you who haven't been in a negative situation that might involve overstaying, the unwelcome overstaying of sellers, it's just miserable. And your client's experience is also miserable. So security deposit is a way to minimize the fallout of a seller overstaying their welcome. And then we'll go on. I don't think we're going to belabor any of these points here. Right of entry. Actually, let's read that security deposit paragraph real quick. Seller agrees to deliver to buyer no later than the closing a security deposit in the amount of, in the form of, the security deposit is to secure the performance of seller's obligation under the leaseback. Seller shall not have the right to apply the security deposit toward the payment of rent. Refund of the security deposit is subject to the requirements of Utah law and is also dependent upon seller's compliance with all of seller's obligation under the leaseback, including delivering the property to buyer as provided in Section 6 below. That's a big sentence there, because possession. For those of you who've been around long enough, you know that possession. If you've been involved in a bad situation where your clients go take possession of the property and it's in rough shape, I mean, our recourse does not look very attractive. We do have it, but it's hard to really execute and make anybody satisfied with our tools there. But here we have a security deposit, so that's one benefit. We actually have an amount of money that someone would want back, and it's in our possession. And that's big. So don't forget that. And here's another thing I would recommend too. If the seller is saying, listen, I'm not going to pay rent. It's 30 days, but I'm not going to pay you rent for those 30 days. Maybe an appropriate response for the situation might be, okay, fine. We were going to charge you $5,000 for a security deposit because that seemed appropriate. We're now going to charge you $10,000 for a security deposit. You're going to get it all back when things go well, but we want $10,000 for a security deposit. That's just, one of the things to think about. Increase your security deposit to, make them think twice about being a jerk on their way out. That is something you can consider and present to your buyers. And of course, that has default, how we handle default of the leaseback. This is something that a lot of people don't really cover if they just write, a few sentences in an addendum. They don't really cover what happens when things go bad. They just talk about some basic terms, when you're going to deliver physical possession, but they don't cover adequately what happens when things go bad. And then here is what Scott and Linda was talking about, penalty for holdover. I really like this one. In the event, so let's read this one. Seller shall be liable to pay rent for the holdover period and to indemnify buyer for damages including, but not limited to, rental loss, lodging expenses, and attorney fees. Seller shall be liable to buyer for all costs incurred as a result of any breach by seller. Holdover rent shall be determined by prorating the rent in Section 2 of the leaseback. So in the event the rent amount in Section 2 of the leaseback is left blank or zero, buyer and seller agree that the rent for the holdover period shall be X number of dollars per day and due immediately on a daily basis. Buyer's acceptance of daily rent during the holdover period does not constitute an extension of the rental period, and buyer may elect to go through the eviction process to have seller removed from property. Okay, so there's a couple things to think about in your strategy of using this document there. In order to have, according to this document, which I don't really like, but in order to have, to use the per day penalty, you have to have zero. You have to have a zero in there. So otherwise, they want to prorate the rents in the event the rent is buyer's seller costs. Holdover rent shall be determined by prorating the rent of Section 2 of the leaseback. Yeah, I actually don't like that as a penalty necessarily, because I don't think your rents will be high enough to justify it. And a really good example of that would be, let's say they do hold over. Well, what is the effect on your client? The effect on your client is, at a minimum, they got to go get a hotel. How much do hotels cost? $75 a day? No, not anywhere I live and stay. So think about just the bare minimum of a hotel cost for per day per diem, because that's the floor. Like we don't have a place to stay and sleep, so the floor is what it costs me to find a place to stay and sleep. And finding a hotel in Park City in February, that's a lot different than finding a hotel in Salt Lake City.
We need to find out the rates are for Four Seasons, because
that's right.
High floor, high ceiling.
Yeah, we're staying in somewhere nice. Hey, I mean, that's a good point, right? If you're buying a $2 million home, you don't get the Super 8 rate for a hotel. It's a Grand America. Come on. Yeah. So anyway, so before we move on, does anybody have any questions or experiences to share in regards to the short-term rental agreement? And of course,
I'm glad you covered this. This is actually new form, relatively new, as it's an addendum to the purchase contract, where the previous one was a separate written agreement to the REPC. And I like this a lot better. It handles all the issues the other one had.
Yeah, and I think too, people might have been holding that outside of maybe not sharing that stuff with their lender the way they should have, and now that's a lot harder to do. Scott says I'd be at $500 a day minimum. Yeah, I think it's pretty easy to paint a situation that you could request $500 a day.
During the height of ski season, it's a lot more than that. So you have to bump that up, Scott.
Yeah, you got to pump those numbers up. Those are rookie numbers. Yeah, so remember that. And honestly, the more I think about it, there's almost incentive to have zero in the the per month rental agreement, so you can hit them hard. Because the thing that we care about is getting possession. That's the number one priority, is getting possession when we agreed on it. That's the number one priority. And so to really penalize someone severely on a per day basis, I think is the way to do that. It cannot be too high. You want them gone. That's in Utah. So here's what I will tell you. I will tell you a horror story of what happens when people don't leave, just so you are aware and maybe appropriately scared, worried, frightened of what happens when you don't use these things. I was involved. I probably told this story before, so if I have, you can go ahead and mute this right now and scroll Reddit. But I was involved as a broker in a situation. I got a call, 3 or 4 o'clock in the afternoon. Mike, my buyer's trying to get into their house, and the seller is not out, and it's escalating. And the tone in their voice just said, okay, I'll be right over. I didn't ask too many questions. And when I got there, the police were already there. There were 2 very large U-Haul trucks parked in front of this house. And all I saw was a man in the garage, kind of milling about in the garage for just a few minutes. Then he shuts the garage, and all the lights in the house go out. And so what I learned was that, the seller was supposed to be out, let's just say noon. The buyers are there waiting, and the buyer wasn't happy that he wasn't out. And the buyer went up and immediately did the vinegar instead of honey approach. And the seller just didn't like it. And the seller just said, okay, this was a Friday. This is like Friday early afternoon, and they had words, and the seller shut the doors and didn't come out for the entire weekend. Didn't communicate, wouldn't answer a phone call, and I don't think that the buyer got in there till Tuesday. And so after this altercation, this verbal altercation, of course, the buyer calls the cops because the cops are going to handle this. And the cops showed up and said, "You're a landlord. This is a civil matter. We don't do anything. We will not do a thing." And I think the blood went away from their face there for a minute. But yeah, if they would have just gone in there and go, "Hey, sorry," if they'd have just, bit their tongue and used a little honey, they'd have been in there that weekend because it wasn't that big a deal. And spite is a powerful motivating factor. So remember that. And that's also why, like, you can, and in this situation, no one would have used this document, right? But you can see why these documents are important, because when people get in high pressure situations, they will use all sorts of weird tactics to get out of them or make excuses, what have you. So
another reason to use this form is if you just put a regular addendum together and say, seller to take possession or buyer to take possession of the estate, seller shall remain in the property for 2 days, and that's it. You're practicing law instead of actually protecting your client. And if this blows up and a complaint goes to division, and there was a form you should have used, you're liable. So yeah, it's important to use the form. If there is a form for something, use it. Don't play attorney and write your own legal, or have AI write it for you, because AI is not your brokerage, and they are not the division of real estate, and that will not pass the muster if your a complaint's filed against you. Well, yeah. AI said that doesn't work.
I just read an article about an attorney, the judge in the case dismissed both attorneys on each side because both of them had to admit they used AI for their arguments, and the AI produced arguments that weren't legally sound. So he dismissed both attorneys.
Wow. Yeah.
So yeah, even the attorneys are using it and they're getting their butts kicked. They should know better. Let's see, it's 1:50. Let's talk about this. I had an interesting conversation just before I jumped into this, because I'm always looking for fresh stuff to talk about. And someone said, what would be interesting is to have some strategy. They didn't even talk about it in this in terms of Huddle, but my ears perked up. And their comment was, I've got a property that is perfectly fine, and I've had 2 buyers walk away from it for ridiculous reasons. And basically the reasons could probably boil down to cold feet. And so now I'm left with kind of a stigmatized property. It's been under contract twice, and both times the inspections were fine. And the buyers said, well, I don't like I think one of the comments was, I guess I don't want to live in a cul-de-sac, was a comment, even though, the house was in a cul-de-sac when they saw it. So stuff like that. And so how can I overcome that, especially in the public's eyes or how it's listed? And I don't know that I definitely did not have a great answer at the time, but I did go in and I had some ideas. And in the short period of time that I did use AI, and I did use actually Remy on this. I didn't go to another source, but I did use Remy on this. And I like some of these answers. So some of the things that you can do are, I think for starters, our instincts here is that we should put together a plan with our seller about how we're going to handle this. Because it is an issue, and I don't think you should let it go unstated that, hey, we've got a new challenge ahead of us, in that this will appear to the buyers and the agents that having gone under contract twice and failed. So we do need a new marketing strategy to overcome this. Here's my plan. What do you think? I do think you should address this head on with your seller to let them know that you're working for them. You're thinking through their problem that they have now. One, we keep the explanation factual and short. In this instance, with this property that we're talking about, it seems really easy to overcome that and just say, yeah, it seems like both of these people had cold feet. We never actually received any list of repairs from the inspections, and you state the facts that both people did inspections. We never got anything back. This home's ready to go. We don't foresee any of those problems. And by the way, if you would like, this is also obviously with your seller's permission. Here's our seller's disclosures. Here's maybe some receipts of repairs and maintenance that we've done over the years. So yeah, we installed a new water heater last year. Here's a receipt for that. Provide a packet of evidence of what's been going on, if you do have it, obviously, what's been going on with this property to address these concerns head on to potential buyers. I think that's actually a really good idea. AI is calling this a confidence packet. Not a bad name. Not a bad name.
I like it.
HOA docs. So maybe instead of, because I think this is real. One of the hesitations of a buyer in this situation may be, well, I'm going to put this under contract, and everybody's backing out because they put it under contract, and then they receive all the information afterwards. So we tackle this problem head on, and we give them all the information up front and say, we're not scared of anything we're giving you. Here's going to be our seller's disclosure packet anyway. So go ahead and review that up front before you make your offer. Obviously, context would matter in this situation, and you're smart, so you be the judge of whether or not that would work. I think we can reframe the MLS agent remarks in certain situations. I don't know that you want to just blanket that be your response. You should think through that and whether or not this situation warrants it. Linda says, add a simple statement to the listing. Buyer had a personal issue. Lucky for your buyer if it is available. And Linda says, also reverse prospect. Yeah, that's a really great thing that you should do. You should absolutely be calling everybody who's looked at this property and thought about it and do some reverse prospecting. And I'm sure Jill Stringham can tell you how to do it, which is real scout.
Mike, another good thing is call other listing agents around the area that are kind of watching that as a comp and letting them know the reason it failed, because word spreads like wildfire through the real estate community.
Yep.
And you can change your perception through agents.
Yeah. Really great advice. Also, so the scripting and the wording, I actually think you should start with REMI here. And in REMI, when you do a CLA, do a soft launch of this property and explain in remedy at the very bottom. I keep saying remedy. REMI, at the very bottom, you can just ask it questions about the results it gave you and say, hey, this has fallen out of contract twice. I need some language here to help me make a statement about its condition and address this issue head on. And present that solution to your seller before you proceed, obviously. But I think, there are situations in which you should potentially reword your description. Scott has a comment. Take it away, Scott.
I was on a Pro Standards panel one time where a listing agent said, hey, it fell out of contract. The buyer's financing fell through. The buyer was embarrassed because she said all her friends knew she was under contract on that listing, and she actually took the listing agent to Pro Standards. Now, she didn't win, but I wouldn't want to be there and deal with that, so I recommend not lying or making something up, because the woman was mortified.
Yeah,
I agree with that.
good comment, Scott.
Yeah. Interestingly enough, Rennie did say these things. Avoid saying buyer got cold feet. Inspection was perfect. No issues at all. Buyer was difficult. So avoid those things. I'm with you here. I think it's like, we're making statements about things that people know. People know who's making these offers. This was the AI REMI suggestion. Back on market after buyer canceled during due diligence. No repair requests were submitted. Well-maintained home with seller disclosures and maintenance records available. Easy to show. Ready for a new buyer. That's, kind of addresses this statement head on. It doesn't accuse anybody of anything. So it isn't the easiest thing to resolve. Let's just say that. There's no clean out here. But there's all sorts of things that you could do as a relaunch and address these issues. So I don't think you need to give a reason. 20% fallout of contract. Yeah, I mean, that's a pretty easy statement to make. At any given time in our industry, good or bad, 15 to 20% of our deals are they're being canceled. Happens. But Linda makes a good point. The good agents will ask. So I think you are being a little irresponsible if this has happened to you and you don't prepare yourself and your seller for how you're going to respond to it. So anyway, deep dive into that. And Remy's a really good starting spot. It's not the solution. It's a tool to help you navigate this. So don't just cookie cutter out a Remy and think that it solves your problem, because you got to use your brain and think through these problems. And before it's 1:58. I'm interested to know the score of the Mexico game, because I am kind of rooting for them. There are rivals on the world stage in soccer, and we want to beat them badly otherwise. But for now, I am rooting for Mexico. Does anybody have any real estate-related topics before we all sign off? Oh, Deanna. So I'm assuming that 1-0, Mexico. They should win this game. Anybody have any real estate-related comments before we sign off? It doesn't look so. Thanks so much for coming. Thanks for your help, Kev. And we'll see you next time, y'all.